Hey, my name is Todd Sharp, and today I'm going to be talking about migrating to OCI, which is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So let's get into the session, and we're going to go through the slides here. And at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A, so please hold all your questions or post them in the chat, and we'll definitely address them at the end of the session. So this is Oracle's safe harbor statement. Essentially what it's telling you is this is all for informational purposes, and please don't make any purchasing decisions based on what you see here in this presentation today. So this is me. Again, my name is Todd Sharp, and I am a full stack developer from Blairsville, Georgia. And I've worked a lot with Java and Groovy and Node and a lot of front-end technologies, so pretty comfortable from the database all the way to the front end. And currently I'm paid to be a developer advocate for cloud and autonomous at Oracle, which basically means I have a really cool job. I get to play with a lot of technology. I get to make really cool demos and play with the cloud and play with our awesome autonomous database, and get to tell you all about that. So really great job. So here's the agenda we're going to be looking at today. First thing we're going to do is take a look at the Oracle Cloud free tier, and then I'll show you how you can sign up, how you can launch a free autonomous database, how you can migrate your database and migrate some objects, and then launch a free VM. So essentially this presentation was kind of inspired by a blog post that I did about a month ago, where I took my blog, my personal blog, which was being hosted on Amazon Web Services, and I migrated that blog over to the Oracle Cloud free tier. And what's really awesome about that is, even though it was kind of, a small custom application that I had written myself, backed by a MySQL database, I was using S3 for object storage, just for the, the images and pictures that I uploaded in my blog posts. So it was a very basic, small application, not a lot of traffic, not a huge database, but I took that and I migrated it to the Oracle Cloud. And by doing that, I suffered no performance, hits whatsoever. All the, the speed, responsiveness, the traffic, all that is just the same as it was on AWS. But the really awesome thing is I'm saving $40 a month, which isn't a whole ton of money. But when it comes to small personal projects like this, every little bit helps. And so many developers have a lot of these kind of small little projects that they're, maybe using Amazon or whatever hosting cloud provider to host their applications. There may be golf league websites or church websites or nonprofit organizations where maybe, you're the developer in the group, so it kind of falls on you to be the webmaster or person who manages the forum. And things like that. So in my opinion, this Oracle Cloud free tier is just this perfect playground to be able to create little applications like this and host them freely on the web. They're always free. They will always be free. And there's no headaches. And at the same time, it lets you really kind of play around with the Oracle Cloud, which I think once you get to get in there and play with it, I think you'll realize that it's a really awesome cloud. It's really easy to use. The interfaces are very clean, consistent, and I just think you'll really love it. So let's take a look at the Oracle Cloud free tier. And so you'll hear me talk about things that are always free. And by always free, we mean always free. So yes, you do have to have a credit card on file when you sign up. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. But if you select these always free services and you use these always free services, you will never be charged. This is not a 12-month trial. It's not a 6-month trial. It's not a 1-month trial. These services that we're going to talk about in a second here will always be free, assuming that you're actively using them. If you're not actively using them, if you spin up a VM and you never put anything on it, it's going to be eventually deleted. But if you spin up a VM, you point it at a free autonomous database, and you're hosting a website, it will always be free and you'll never be charged for it. So what services fall under this always free umbrella? Well, you would think that it's kind of throttled, and it is somewhat throttled a little bit, but basically it's a really solid offering. We have the first service that's always free is our autonomous database, and this can be either the ATP version or the ADW version. And the difference between those two being is ATP is autonomous transaction processing, which is kind of your standard workload database, just your normal transactional database. And ADW is more for big data. So, you're working with tons of data and you want to do some really efficient processing of that data, you're going to go for ADW. But typically your apps, your blogs, your forums, these kind of things are going to be using ATP. So what we offer on the always free tier is 2 total databases. So you can have 2 separate instances of ATP or ADW. Each of those instances will have 1 CPU and 20 gigs of storage. So it's not like, again, it's not like we're giving you just like 100 megs of storage so you could barely store anything in your database. This is 20 gigs. This is pretty significant. And if you were to outgrow that, you're probably at a point where you understand that, there's going to be some costs involved if you're outgrowing 20 gigs of storage. The next thing is 2 virtual machines, each with 1/8 CPU and 1 gig of memory. Now, again, these are not machines where you're going to be doing like machine learning or massive computation on these VMs. But if you're hosting a blog, if you're hosting a forum, perfect, and they will work just perfectly for you. I should warn you here, when it says 1 gigabyte of memory, it's actually more around like 995 megabytes, which is just about 1 gigabyte. But if you're installing any kind of software that does a check on the memory of the machine and it's looking for memory in gigabytes, you might have an issue when you're installing that. So keep that in mind. I've noticed it with one third-party software that I actually had to modify their install script to check memory in gigs and megabytes instead of gigs, and make an exception for it because, like I said, it's right about 995 megs, but for all intents and purposes, that's a gig. You get 2 block volumes, 100 gigabytes total. Basically, these are your storage drives for your VMs, and will be attached to your VMs as you spin them up. 50 gigs each, and you get 10 gigs of object storage and 10 gigs of archive storage. So think of this like you would think of S3. You have 10 gigs to store any kind of assets that you want to store in object storage, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. Finally, you get a load balancer, you get 10 megs of bandwidth, you get monitoring, notifications, email delivery, outbound data, all included. Take a look at the link down at the bottom of the screen there for very specific details if you need to know more. But essentially, this tier is perfect for your personal projects, for your small little projects, for your proof of concepts. The tier has everything you need to get started. Now let's talk about what I call almost free services. And again, if you're doing these small projects, these proof of concepts, these maybe you're using it for a small staging area for your production application. When you think about these other services that I'm about to talk about, they're not included in the always free tier, but they're just about free. And what do I mean by that? So for example, Oracle Functions. I consider Oracle Functions an almost free service. And the reason I consider it that is because you get basically 2 million calls a month absolutely free. So if you're wanting to play with serverless functions, you're looking to maybe learn about them, maybe you have an application that needs to use them and you want to figure out how to do that, you can use Oracle Functions for your serverless functions, and you get 2 million calls every month for free. If you use the execution time pricing, that's based on gigabyte memory seconds, you get the first 400,000 of those per month for free. You have to work really hard, I think, to exceed this free tier for Oracle Functions. Now, a production application, obviously, you're going to probably end up exceeding that. But for your side projects, for these kind of things, just to learn, you're probably never going to see a bill at all for Oracle Functions. The next thing I like to talk about when it comes to almost free is our Oracle streaming service. And essentially, this is a full-featured messaging queue for having producing messages, having consumers that consume those messages. And with the Oracle streaming service, you're really cheap when it comes to transferring data. You can see down at the bottom of the screen there, I've gone to our cost estimator and I've estimated 10 gigs of data transferred and 10 gigs of storage, 10 gigabytes per hour of storage, and we're talking about $1, $2 max for your bill. So I say almost free because we're looking at about $1, $2 for 10 gigs, which is a pretty healthy amount of transfer when it comes to messaging. So you could play with this, you could learn how it works. Maybe you haven't used messaging much. And coming very soon, in fact, in December, I believe, the Oracle streaming service is going to be fully compatible with the actual Apache Kafka API. So you can use the Kafka API to send your messages with Oracle streaming service with just some very minor modifications, and your app will continue to work, and you could use the Oracle streaming service instead of Kafka, so you don't have to worry about hosting your own Kafka instances, spinning up Zookeeper, all of that stuff. You just point it at the existing Oracle streaming service and you're good to go. So let's talk about how you sign up for the Oracle Cloud free tier. It's really easy, and we're going to jump through some of these screens here, but essentially it's just a real simple process to sign up for the Oracle Cloud free tier. So the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to provide an email address and choose what country or territory you're in, agree to the terms of service, and then click the next button. The next screen is going to ask you what kind of account type you're going to use this for, whether it's company or personal use. And then it's going to ask you to give it a cloud account name. Now, this has to be universally unique among all Oracle clients. And this is what's going to be known later on as your tenancy name. So you're going to see that quite often as you go through the Oracle Cloud dashboard or the documentation. And so this is basically a unique name for your account. For myself, I use the name of my blog. For my internal work account, I use my first and last name. So pick whatever name that you want that you'll be able to easily remember. Make sure you jot this down, write it down on a piece of paper, and keep it somewhere handy. But essentially, this is going to be your tenancy name. Next, you're also going to choose the home region. So this is the data center that's going to be closest to you geographically. It doesn't have to be, but for latency purposes, you probably want to pick something that's geographically close to you so that you're not going to notice any kind of lag or anything like that. Next, you're going to have to verify your mobile telephone number. So you'll enter your mobile number. You'll get a text message sent to you. You'll enter that code and then just click Verify Code and verify your mobile number. Next, you're going to choose a password. There's some pretty strict requirements for creating a strong password. I believe it has to be 15 characters, has to have an uppercase, a lowercase, and a special character, and maybe a number. But essentially create a really strong password, something that you're going to remember, and confirm that, and you'll be able to move on. Now, payment information. This is where it kind of gets a little sticky sometimes with some people, and believe me, I'm right there with you. Nobody likes to put their credit card on file and worry about, tiny little charges sneaking in, little fees, little things like that. Oops, I didn't know that this service cost money, and now all of a sudden I have a $30 bill. And I've been there. I mean, I once played around with Amazon SQS, and I had a loop that ran all night sending text messages. The problem was I didn't put a 1 in front of the number that was sending text messages, so it ended up somehow being an international number that I was sending a text message to. So all night long, my script ran, and I ended up with a $30 bill. Now, yes, that's going to happen sometimes. You should be careful with the APIs that you're using. Never let something run all night that you're not sure is going to charge you. But my point being here is you need to put in this payment information to have it on file, but you will never be charged unless you elect to upgrade the account. So when you sign up for this free tier, you're also going to get a 30-day trial that includes $300 that you could use for any paid services. Now this is different from the always free tier. If you select a VM that is not considered an always free VM, maybe it's a larger shape. If you select a database service that is not always free, you can try that out for 30 days. No problem, as long as you don't go over that $300. Now, once that 30 days hits, if you do not opt in to a paid account, the database, the VM, whatever it is, will be shut off and you will never be charged. You have to opt in order to be charged. I just want to really emphasize the fact that you'll never be charged if you forget to cancel. That's never going to happen. When we go through and we sign up for the always free tier, I'll make sure that you see how to make sure that you'll never be charged for those and that they'll never be turned off. But this is something slightly separate. It's that 30-day $300 trial. Again, if you do not opt in, you will never be charged for those services that are not on the always free tier. So you put in your credit card information, you'll see a very small charge. It's a temporary charge. A very common way to verify a credit card is to put a very small, like under $1 charge, and then eventually refund that charge. And that's just to verify that the credit card works and is good and is active and is not fake. So yeah, you'll add your credit card details and you'll verify, and that's it. Once you have signed up, you'll be able to access the Oracle Cloud dashboard. And this is kind of the screen that you're going to see most of the time when you log into the Oracle Cloud. You have some quick actions at the top here. You have the ability to create a VM instance, the ability to create a database, create a data warehouse, things like that. Up here in the left-hand corner, you see the burger menu. And if you click that, you'll see quick shortcuts to many different sections within the Oracle Cloud. So your compute, your database, your email settings, all of these things are going to be within that burger menu. Where you would manage your users, where you manage compartments, where you manage roles, these kind of things. Everything you're going to need is going to be somewhere in that burger menu. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, the quick actions are really easy ways to get started, and you can click on create a VM instance and get started with that really quickly. So some good to know things. Just to kind of summarize, most always free resources can be provisioned only in your home region. So when we were going through and I said you should sign up for a region that's geographically close to you, you should keep in mind that if you're going to use the always free resources, you have to provision those in your home region. That doesn't mean you can't provision something in Phoenix, for example, if Ashburn was your home region, but you just will not be able to do that always free resource in Phoenix. So just make sure when you're going to create an always free resource, you do that in your home region. Like I said earlier, free accounts will remain available as long as your account is used within the past 60 days. So if you spin up a VM, you never do anything with it, If you don't touch it for 60 days, that's going to go away. The free trial, as I said, provides you with $300 of cloud credits that are valid for up to 30 days. And paid resources provisioned during free trial are reclaimed by Oracle unless you upgrade. Again, I just want to emphasize, you can use paid resources. You must opt in to keep those as paid resources. Okay, cool. More information, check out the link at the bottom of that screen. So let's get into it. Now that we've created a free, always free account, let's launch a database and assume that for our migration, in my case, as I said, I had a MySQL database and I wanted to migrate that over to autonomous transaction processing. So the first thing you're going to have to do when you want to migrate a database is launch the new database. So let's take a look at what it takes to launch an autonomous database. So we have our cloud dashboard main home screen. As I said, the first thing you can do is click on create a database and you'll get started really quickly. So the first thing you're going to do is enter an instance and a database name. So this is just a display name for within your Oracle Cloud dashboard. In this case, I've called it ATP instance here. And then our database name, that's the actual database name that's going to be created, the Oracle database name. And for the database name, you can only use letters and numbers and a max of 14 characters. So no dashes, no special characters, nothing like that. Now you're going to choose a workload and deployment type. As I said, transaction processing is your kind of traditional relational database. We're not going to be doing any large data scanning operations, so we're going to not choose data warehouse for this particular instance. And our deployment type, serverless or dedicated. So with Autonomous Database, you have the option of running either in a serverless mode, which is essentially just a shared infrastructure, right? This is an infrastructure that maybe there's other databases running within that same rack. Now you can also go with dedicated infrastructure. I do not believe you could do that with a always free database. But if your business had a need for using a dedicated infrastructure, completely private and completely physically separate from every other client, you can do that. So just keep that in mind. All right. Now we're going to configure our CPU and storage. You see right there at the top of the screen the always free button, my favorite button. So make sure that's toggled. Make sure that is turned on and it's blue, it's not grayed out. Select always free and your autonomous database instance will be always free. Your CPU core count and storage are disabled at this point because, like I said, you get one CPU, you get 20 gigs with an always free. You cannot change that. If you were creating a autonomous database instance that is a paid instance, you can change your core. You can change your storage. These can auto scale for you up and down on demand. So if you check the auto scaling button down below. So as your workload increases, you need 4 CPUs. You can auto scale it, and then it'll automatically scale back down. But for always free, you get 1 CPU, you get 20 gigs, and that's what you get. Next up, you're going to create some credentials, and you're going to choose licensing. Actually, you're not going to choose licensing. You're going to get a license included because that's the only option with always free. So right here, you're going to just put in a password, and this is your admin password, and the username will always be admin. It's read-only. You have to go with that. You can create additional users, but you need to have an admin user created right up front. And at this point, you just click create. And what happens is you're redirected to the database details page. You get a kind of overview of the instance. You have some buttons along the top, and this kind of layout is going to be very familiar to you as the more you use Oracle Cloud. You have your detailed information views that show you everything you need to know about that particular resource, and all that information is presented in a very clean format. down at the bottom of the screen, you'll usually have some more actions or some different metrics or whatnot as it relates to that resource. But in this case, you have your provisioning screen, your detail screen that tells you that we're provisioning. You can see, as I've highlighted here, the instance type is free, and it's going to take a few minutes, and once that is all done, you'll get an available screen. You'll get an available status. At this point, you can see where the star is here. There is a DB connection button. You're going to want to click this, and that's going to bring up a modal screen, modal dialog. Now, this has slightly changed since yesterday. It's going to look slightly different for you when you go to sign up. But essentially what you're going to want to do is download your client credentials, and this is what's called a wallet. And this contains basically a key that you can use to make your connection to your ATP instance. And the reason you need this is that so you can create basically a TLS, a secure connection to your database. It's just a cert that is used to create that secure connection, and there's plenty of documentation on how to use this. We're not going to go into details on that in this presentation, but it's really easy to use. You download it, make sure it's handy, and you can use that for your application to make your connection, whether it's JDBC, if you're going to use SQL Developer Web, if you're going to use SQL Developer, you'll need the wallet to create your connection to your ATP instance. And as an added bonus with ATP and ADW, if you click on the Service Console button on your details page, you can take advantage of a few really nice services, namely Apex. If you are using any kind of low-code application development, if you're doing any kind of low-code application development, you can take advantage of this absolutely free. It's a browser-based environment. It's basically kind of gives you a really quick way to get an application front end that talks to your ATP backend. What else? You have Oracle REST data services and SODA. You can use those for free against your ATP instance. You can use SQL Developer Web, which is basically an online version of the SQL Developer IDE. It's a really quick and easy way to write queries, take a look at your data, manage some parts of your instance, all online. You don't have to download any software. You don't have to install any software. You can do it all online. And finally, Oracle ML SQL Notebooks. These are an Apache Zeppelin-based notebook that you could use to create some machine learning visualizations, do some queries, train some data sets, apply some algorithms, any kind of machine learning cool stuff that you have in mind that you want to play with, absolutely free, included with your ATP instance. So the next step, now that you have your database up and running, we're going to want to migrate our database. So it's really easy to do. You can use SQL Developer to do this. There is a full migration guide available. I've included the link here. I do suggest you take a look at it because it can be kind of involved, especially when you're going from one type of database to another. In my case, MySQL to Oracle ATP. You want to make sure that you take your time, read the documentation, and get your data over from your source database to your new free, always free database. So there is a migration wizard, as I said, included with SQL Developer, and there's basically 6 steps you need to take. You need to create a repository, and this is just basically a database that stores some kind of meta information as it relates to your projects and your migrations. The next step is to create a project. You choose a connection and a source database. So in this case, I created a connection that pointed to my RDS MySQL database, and then you map your data types. If you have, for example, a Boolean data type and you're coming over to Oracle that has no Boolean type, you need to kind of map how those things are done. And usually there's a pretty good default mapping when it comes to these kind of things, but if you have to do anything special, you can do that with the migration wizard. You can translate objects, things like stored procedures and views, and then finally you choose your target database and you can then run your migration. So here's just a kind of a couple screens of how it looks to use the migration wizard. Like I said, you can convert source types to Oracle types. So like I said, you have a big int maybe in MySQL, and the Oracle data type is going to default to number 24 with 0 precision. So that you could do this kind of mappings. You can add new rules, you can whatever you need to do to get your data from your source to your new ATP instance. And that's it for as it comes to migrating database. You can use SQL Developer, get your data from RDS, put it into your new ATP instance, and move on your merry way. The next step is to migrate objects. So like I said, I used S3 for my images for my blog, and in my case I only had about 100 images, so it really wasn't that bad. I was feeling kind of lazy, so I essentially downloaded all of them manually and manually uploaded them to my new Oracle Cloud Object Storage account. But there are other options available. You can use tools like rclone, and there's a link to a white paper that goes into how you would use rclone to do that. There's also, there's other tools available to do S3 migrations. You want to obviously make sure that if you do, or when you do migrate to Oracle Object Storage, in my case, I had a bunch of blog posts that had links that pointed to S3. So obviously I had to run some manual queries to update those blog posts to point at the new link, but it was really not difficult at all to just do a regex replace on the S3 URL and point it at the new object storage URL. And then finally, you update your code within your application to use the OCI S3 compatible endpoint. Now, there is a full OCI SDK. There are many of them. In my case, being a Java developer, there's an OCI Java SDK that you can use to interact with Oracle Object Storage. If you were building a brand new application, I would encourage you to do that. If you have an existing application that points at S3, what I would suggest you do is use the OCI S3 compatible endpoint. This is a really nice thing that lets you take existing AWS code that points at S3 and lets you point that at OCI Object Storage instead. You'll have to use a path style URLs, but there is documentation available. It boils down to being about 2 or 3 lines of code you have to add to your existing application, and everything else just works. All your gets, puts, posts, deletes, updates to and from S3 will work just the same with your OCI Object Storage bucket, just with a couple lines of configuration changes basically. So here's an example of that. In this case, the only thing I had to add was the client options to set path style access to true, to set chunk encoding disabled to true, and then set the endpoint to this OCI Object Storage compatible endpoint. And that was all I had to do in my blog code to make the change so that new images get uploaded to the proper location in OCI. Again, this is Amazon code. This is code that is used to interact with S3. I added lines 4, 5, and 6, and my application worked perfectly going forward with the new object storage bucket. And the link at the end of that, at the bottom of the page there, tells you a little bit more about the S3 compatible API. So check that out. So the next thing we need to do is launch a VM. So I had my application, my blog application, which is it's actually written in Grails. So it had a WAR file that is deployed on Tomcat, and I needed to launch the VM in the free Oracle Cloud tier so that I could deploy, I can install Tomcat and deploy that WAR on the new VM. And so for that, we go back to the Oracle Cloud dashboard homepage. We click Create a VM Instance. and we give that VM instance a name. We can choose an operating system or image source. In my case, I really like Oracle Linux, so I left it as Oracle Linux, but you could choose CentOS. You have some other options. At this point, you want to be careful about licensing. You don't want to obviously choose anything for an always free VM that has some licensing fees associated with it. So nothing like Red Hat or Windows. Use Oracle Linux. It's really cool, and it's autonomous itself, so it self-updates, it patches. You never have to worry about any of that. It's really cool, trust me, and you should stick with that. Next thing you're going to do is choose your availability domain, and one of them is going to have the always free eligible label next to it. The next thing you're going to do is select your instance type. Again, virtual machine, always free available. You don't want to choose a bare metal machine because that is not included in the always free tier. You can certainly pay to use a bare metal machine. We have many options, some very powerful options, but as we're talking about always free, you're not going to pick a bare metal machine. Next thing you're going to do is choose an instance shape. You're going to have one choice here, and it's going to be an E2.1 micro instance, and it's going to have that always free eligible label. So you've probably seen this many times throughout this talk today, and you always want to make sure that when you're provisioning resources in your free account, that you look for that always free eligible label. If you don't see that, you might want to take a second look and check why you're not seeing that. So if you're interested in just staying always free, then look for that label. And like I said, you get 1 core CPU and 1 gig of RAM. Next thing you're going to want to do is check this section. This may be hidden. You may have to click Show Shape and Networking link to expand this section. But make sure you do. And if you're doing something like a blog, obviously, or a forum, or whatever you're doing that's going to be web accessible, you're going to want to assign a public IP address. This is not chosen by default, so make sure you go in and select Assign a Public IP Address if that's what you want to do. You can select a virtual cloud network, select a compartment, or you could just use the defaults, leave them as they are. They're going to be just fine. They'll work just great. But again, if you want something publicly accessible, make sure you assign a public IP address. Next, you want to select an SSH key. You can generate an SSH key. Again, we're not going to talk about how to do that in this presentation. You should already know if you've been doing any kind of development for any amount of time, or you can Google it if you're not familiar with it, or even if you're like me and have been developing for a really long time and just forget exactly how to do it every time, you're going to end up Googling it anyways. But essentially, you want a private public key pair, and you're going to upload the public part of that key pair to when you're creating your VM. So when you go later on to SSH into that machine, you're going to use the associated private key, and you'll be able to SSH in no problem. So once you click Create, you're going to be taken to the Instance Details page. Now this looks kind of similar to our ATP Instance Details page, and you'll have things like your public IP address listed, the compartment that your instance is located within, your compartment OCID, all these kind of things. But if you're going to be creating something that's web accessible, like a blog in this case, what you're going to want to do is click on the virtual cloud network right there that I have the arrow pointing to. And that's going to take you to this VCN Details page. Go in the left-hand side, there's going to be a menu, and you're going to see a link called Security Lists. You're going to want to click on Security Lists. And once you get to the security list, this is where you can manage your security list that manages your ingress and egress within to your network. So in this case, we're going to create a blog that's web accessible, and it's going to be a TLS website, so it's going to have port 80 and 443 open. So you're going to create an ingress rule You'll leave the source type as a CIDR. You will leave stateless unchecked. You're going to enter a source CIDR of 0.0.0/0. Basically the entire internet. You want to be able to access this ingress rule. The protocol is going to be TCP. Your source port range, leave blank, leave empty for all. And your destination port range is going to be 80 and 443. So this will allow those ports through your security list through your virtual cloud network. And at this point, you're ready to deploy your app. Obviously, there are many different ways to do this. If you're a Node developer, if you're using Express, maybe you're using an Nginx reverse proxy. However you're going to do that is outside of the scope of this presentation. But at this point, you're free to deploy your app. I should note that you've created some security list rules to allow port 80 and 443 through your network. You will also have to go into your VM. If you're using Oracle Linux, for example, you're going to have to go into your VM and open up those associated ports on your VM firewall itself. It's not enough to open them on your VCN. You also have to open them through your VM firewall. So keep that in mind. There's really easy ways to do that. It's just basically 2 shell commands and one more to reload the firewall rules. But you can Google that, search that out, and figure out how to open up those firewall ports. But essentially, like I said, at this point, you're free to deploy your app. I went into my VM, SSH'd in, I installed Tomcat. I used certbot and Let's Encrypt for my SSL certificates. I deployed my WAR file to Tomcat and switched my DNS record to point at the new VM's IP. And I was good to go. I was up and running. So that's essentially it. The Oracle Cloud free tier gives you the ability to create these awesome, simple, free applications. They'll always be free, and you can deploy them really quickly, really easily, and work with the OCI dashboard, which is really easy to use. It's clean, it's consistent. You're going to have no problem learning how to use it, and if you do, you can always reach out to me. Come check me out on the Oracle blogs at blogs.oracle.com/developers. Search out my name. You could follow me on Twitter at recursive-codes and reach out to me there, and I'd be glad to help you out and answer any questions you may have. So like I said, we've saved some time here at the end for question and answers, so I'm looking forward to taking any questions that you may have. All right, so like I said, we saved some time here at the end for questions and answers. So if you do have any questions, please post them in the chat, and we will. I'll take care of answering those right now. But since there's no questions coming in, I want to tackle a few, maybe one point of reference. So this presentation was actually recorded back in the November-December timeframe. So there are a few things that have changed as it relates to the free tier. Some of the screens that I showed are slightly different, but for the most part, I think you'll find things really easy to navigate. Like I said, you can always reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'd be glad to help. And yeah, that's about the extent of the changes. I know, for example, like when you're creating an instance, public IP, I believe, is default now. And so some slight changes like that you might come across, but other than that, for the most part, things should be just as you saw in the presentation. So, Marcy, are you seeing any questions come in, or am I? I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything here.
There's a few questions coming in.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
I see them. I have a question, but not directly related to migration. Question is, typically AWS storage is less pricey than Oracle. Is it true? I can't speak for certain about pricing because I'm not a salesperson and I don't spend a lot of time answering pricing type questions. I do know, I have read quite a bit from many different sources that overall the Oracle Cloud, depending on who you talk to, is up to 50% cheaper than AWS overall. So I guess take that for what it's worth. There is a pricing tool I know out there, if you Google Oracle Cloud Infrastructure pricing tool, that you could use to do some comparisons for yourself. But overall, I've been told that our overall cloud prices are less than Oracle. So thanks for your question, Amit. Next question, slide deployment app. Do you have any pointers to read and follow? So it's going to depend very much so on your application and what you're using. You know, what language you're using, what servlet container, what web server. So there's just so many different options there. It's going to depend on what you're using and how you're packaging and deploying your app. So unfortunately, I don't have any general pointers on that. I mean, I would say, you know, if you're familiar with how you've deployed on other clouds, there's pretty much no limitations to the VMs that you're going to find in Oracle Cloud. Next question. Do we get a notification email saying non-usage of service before it shuts down after 60 days? I was originally going to say no, but I think maybe you do. I'm not 100% sure. That's a good question. I'll have to potentially follow up. If you want to email me that question, todd.sharp@oracle.com, I could follow up. But I'm not 100% sure. Sorry about that. I think you do. What operating systems are considered always free? Any operating system that is free is considered always free. So things like CentOS, Oracle Linux. Obviously, Windows is not included as always free because there's licensing that goes along with Windows. Red Hat is a license, a fee-based license for Red Hat. So any operating system that is free to install anywhere and in any other machine would be free to install in the Oracle Cloud. Is free tier available for GovCloud? Another great question that I unfortunately don't have an answer for. You can, certainly I would encourage you to read the terms and conditions that you're agreeing to when you sign up for a free tier. Again, I'm just going on gut here, but my gut would say no. Maybe, but even if it is, my question to you would be, would the offerings on the free tier be sufficient for hosting a government application? I spent 8 years at Booz Allen Hamilton doing government consulting projects, and I can't think of any applications that we built that didn't have more robust requirements than the low CPU low RAM and low storage that is offered on the free tier. So perhaps for like a staging type zone, maybe QA testing staging, that might work. But other than that, I would say, you'd probably want to go to a paid tier. For proof of concept, yeah, I mean, again, sure, that would absolutely be, a possibility if you want. I encourage you to check the terms and conditions that you're agreeing to, and see if there's any limitations to that. I guess the other question with that would be whether or not the government region is included in the free tier. Not only is it acceptable by the terms and conditions, but is that rolled out in the government region itself? Because obviously there are different, security guidelines for the government region. So that's another question that I unfortunately don't have the answer to. But I encourage you to check, and like I said, there is a live chat that you could always use while you're signing up to discuss those types of things with the folks and that side of things. Did I miss a question? All right, I don't see any other questions. We will hang out for another minute or two, and of course be available if you do have any questions. I know there are, I looked through the list here of the attendees, and it did seem like there are a number of folks in the government consulting world for whatever reason. I saw some General Dynamics and Booz Allen Hamilton folks in the attendee list, and if any of you are going to be at the Code for America Summit in Arlington, Virginia next week, I will be there. So you can always reach out to me during that week in Arlington. I'll be at the Oracle booth occasionally, not the whole time, but here and there. And you can reach out to me there if you do have any questions or any other thing that you would like to discuss, or if you just want to come check out my talk. Cool.
Great. Thanks, Todd. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Answering questions. I wanted to thank everybody for attending today. And when this webcast ends, you'll be presented with a survey. So please go ahead and fill that out. We appreciate any feedback you have to make these webcasts more useful. So we hope you have a great day. Anything else you want to add, Todd?
No, that's it. Thanks a lot, Marcy. I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate everyone coming and learning about the Oracle Cloud free tier.
Thank you.
Cool.